There are stories that gently take your hand and lead you somewhere quiet. The story of My Neighbor Totoro does not rush, nor does it try to overwhelm. Instead, it unfolds like a soft breeze through tall grass, subtle, patient, and deeply alive. In its world, the ordinary hums with something unseen. As if just beneath the surface of everyday life, wonder is quietly waiting to be noticed. This is a film that speaks in silence as much as in words. It lingers in the spaces between moments, the hush of a new place, the comfort of small rituals, the quiet emotions we often carry but cannot name. And within that stillness, it invites you to remember a way of seeing the world that is often lost with time. Not louder, not grander, but softer, and somehow far more enduring. The story begins in the beautiful sunny countryside of Japan. Satsuki, Mei, and their father Tatsu move into a house that looks like it belongs in a storybook. Nestled at the edge of a towering camphor forest, the family spends the first few days cleaning and settling in. They also visit their mother, who is recovering from an illness at the hospital. Despite the distance and the hospital setting, the mood remains hopeful. The girls are resilient, finding magic in the mundane tasks of pumping water from the well and exploring the tall grass. Their days are filled with infectious laughter and energy. One Sunday afternoon, while Satsuki is at school and their father is busy in his home office, Mei is left to play in the yard. She spots something peculiar in the grass. A small, semi-transparent spirit scurries past. Mei, driven by pure toddler curiosity, chases it, then encounters a slightly larger blue version, carrying a sack of acorns. Following them through a narrow tunnel of arcing briars and thickets, Mei reaches the base of the massive ancient camphor tree. She tumbles down a hole hidden amongst the roots, and there is where she first meets the forest king, Totoro. But who exactly is Totoro? He is not a character that you can fully explain, but he is something you can feel before you understand. Totoro exists somewhere between the visible and the unseen, a gentle ancient presence that does not belong to the human world, yet watches over it with quiet familiarity. He does not speak in long sentences, nor does he guide with instruction. Instead, he communicates through presence, through stillness, and through the simple act of being there. Totoro can be understood as a kind of forest spirit, similar to the kami of Japanese Shinto belief, beings that inhabit trees, rivers, wind, and earth. He is not separate from nature. He is nature. The softness of moss beneath your feet, the hush of leaves swaying in the wind, the ancient silence of towering trees, all of it lives within him. He represents a world that is not older than humanity, a world that does not speak, but listens. He is a guardian, not a savior. Totoro does not intervene in the way heroes do. He does not fight, fix, or control. Instead, he protects in a quieter way. He accompanies. His presence suggests something deeply comforting. You are not alone, even when you feel small in a vast and uncertain world. He appears not when danger strikes, but when emotions become too heavy to carry alone. In this sense, Totoro is less a protector of the body and more a guardian of the heart. There is a softness to Totoro that feels almost maternal, yet ancient. He represents safety in vulnerability, comfort in uncertainty, and a place where fear can rest without being judged. He does not ask questions. He does not demand strength. He simply exists beside you, and sometimes that is enough. For children especially, he becomes a form of emotional refuge, a way to process feelings they cannot yet name. Totoro is deeply tied to growth, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual growth. He reminds us that not all growth is visible, not all change is immediate, not all magic announces itself. Like a seed beneath the soil, life is always unfolding even when we cannot see it. He embodies that quiet miracle. Totoro is like a bridge between worlds. He exists between reality and imagination, between childhood and something older, deeper, and sacred. He symbolizes the threshold between what we know and what we feel, the doorway between logic and wonder, the fragile space where imagination becomes real. Children can see him because they still live in that space. Adults often cannot because they have learned to close that door. More than anything, Totoro feels like something remembered rather than discovered. He represents the innocence of childhood, the ability to find magic in the ordinary, the quiet belief that the world is alive and kind. He is the part of us that once believed, and perhaps still does, somewhere deep within. Totoro does not exist to be understood in clear terms. He exists to remind you of something you may have forgotten, that comfort does not always come in words, that protection does not always look like strength, and that sometimes the most powerful presence in your life is the one that simply sits beside you in silence. Symbolism in this movie breathes quietly through every frame. The world here coexists in both the literal and symbolic as they often do in childhood, where a tree is both a tree and something sacred, and where the unseen carries as much weight as the visible. At its core, the film becomes a meditation on how human beings, especially children, interpret a world that is at once beautiful, uncertain, and beyond their control. Nature itself is the film's most profound symbol. It is not presented as a passive backdrop, but as a living spiritual presence that holds memory, protection, and quiet wisdom. The towering camphor trees stands as an emblem of endurance and ancient guardianship, its roots stretching into a time far older than human worry. It represents stability in a world that feels fragile, a silent promise that something greater and more enduring exists beyond intimate fear. The small acorns shattered throughout the story carry a gentler metaphor. They symbolize potential, unseen growth, and the invisible process of healing, like emotions that take time to settle or wounds that mend quietly. The acorn reminds us that transformation often happens beneath the surface, long before it can be seen. The motif of invisibility runs quietly throughout the narrative, carrying deep symbolic weight. Certain beings and moments are only accessible to those who open enough to perceive them, suggesting that wonder is not absent from the world, but rather filtered by perception. This becomes a metaphor for the loss of childhood innocence, the gradual closing of a door through which magic once freely entered. The film implies that growing older is not simply gaining knowledge, but also losing a certain kind of sight, the ability to believe without needing to understand. Rain, wind, and shifting weather patterns further deepen the film's symbolic language. These elements act as external reflections of internal states, mirroring emotions that cannot be articulated. Rain becomes more than a natural occurrence. It transforms into a space of pause and reflection, where time slows and vulnerability surfaces. Ultimately, the film's greatest metaphor is childhood itself, not as a stage of life defined by simplicity, but as a way of being in the world. It presents childhood as a state where imagination and reality are not separate, where emotional truths take precedence over logical ones, and where the unseen is not dismissed, but trusted. In doing so, the film suggests that the magic we associate with youth is not something that disappears, but something we slowly learn to ignore. And so, the film becomes less about what is happening on screen and more about what it awakens within the viewer. Its symbols do not demand interpretation, they invite recognition. They ask us to remember a time when the world felt larger, softer, and more mysterious, when comfort could be found in the rustling of leaves, and when the presence of something unseen was not a question, but a quiet certainty. The emotional climax takes shape through a moment that feels painfully real. The arrival of troubling news of her mother from the hospital. Until then, the world has held a delicate balance. Uncertainty existed, but it was softened by routine, by imagination, by the quiet rhythms of daily life. But that letter disrupts everything. It introduces a sharper fear, one that cannot be ignored or transformed so easily. It is no longer a distant worry. It becomes immediate, heavy, and deeply personal. This shift ripples through the sisters in different ways. Satsuki, trying to hold everything together, carries the weight of responsibility and fear at the same time. Mei, unable to fully understand but deeply feeling the emotional tension, reacts with instinct rather than reason. Their argument is not simply a conflict between siblings. It is a fracture caused by fear, by helplessness, by the inability to process something too large for either of them. It reflects how people, even those who love each other most, can momentarily fall apart under emotional strain. Mei's decision to run off on her own to the hospital becomes one of the most powerful symbolic actions in the film. It represents a child's desperate attempt to fix what cannot be fixed, to bridge the distance between fear and hope through sheer will. In her mind, the solution is simple: go to her mother. But the world is not as simple as her heart wants it to be. Her journey turns into disorientation, into being lost, not just geographically, but emotionally. It mirrors the overwhelming feeling of facing something you cannot control, where every direction begins to look the same. This is where the climax deepens. The fear is no longer abstract. It becomes urgent, tangible, and isolating. The familiar world begins to feel vast and indifferent, emphasizing how small and vulnerable one can feel in moments of crisis. Time stretches, and the search becomes not just about finding Mei, but about confronting the terrifying possibility of loss. This climax is not about the external resolution of events, but about an internal shift. It is the moment where childhood encounters its first true sense of helplessness and learns gently that even in that helplessness, there can still be support, connection, and a way forward. The letter, the argument, and Mei's disappearance are not just plot points. They are expressions of a deeper truth. That love does not protect us from fear, but it is what drives us to keep searching even when we are afraid. And so, My Neighbor Totoro does not end with answers, nor with certainty we often crave. It lingers instead in something softer, something quieter. Like the fading echo of a summer day, it leaves behind a feeling rather than a conclusion, as if reminding us that not everything meaningful must be fully understood to be deeply felt. Because life, much like the world it gently portrays, is filled with moments we cannot control, fears we cannot name, and changes that arrive without warning. And yet, within all of that uncertainty, there exists a quiet kind of grace, the kind that reveals itself in small hands held tightly, in the presence of someone who stays, in the invisible comfort that finds us when we need it most. Perhaps that is what the film has been whispering all along, that even when the world feels too vast, too fragile, too uncertain, there is still something kind moving through it, something unseen, yet deeply felt. Something that does not take the pain away, but makes it a little easier to carry. And maybe, long after the story fades, that is what remains with us. Not just the memory of wonder, but the quiet belief that we were never truly alone, even in the moments we feared we might be. So when the silence feels endless and the night seems to grow, there is always a gentle presence we somehow already know. A quiet friend in the spaces where soft winds begin to flow. For it is the forest king, your neighbor, Totoro.